The scanner crackled with static before the dispatcher's voice cut through, sharp and cold as the rain slicking the windshield of Rig 12. Unit 12, we have a code blue, male, late 50s, cardiac arrest. Location, 2417 East Monroe. Respond priority 1. My fingers were already closing around the radio. Unit 12 en route, I replied, voice too steady, too professional, like my body had taken over while my mind tried to make sense of the address. East Monroe. It was a nothing street in a broken part of town. Condemned buildings, flickering streetlights, and a liquor store that had been held up 3 times last year alone. But it was also something else. Familiar. I gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, my gloved hand slipping slightly. My partner Griff glanced at me from the passenger seat, his usually gruff demeanor softened by concern. You good, Riley? I lied.
Yeah.
Just another run, but I wasn't. Because 20417 East Monroe was where he lived, or where he used to live. The man who used to be my father, the man I hadn't seen in 11 years. The man who walked out with a duffel bag and never came back. The man we were speeding toward in a rig full of life-saving gear. My chest tightened. Not panic, not yet, but the anxious creeping prelude to it. I focused on the road, on the rain, on the silence between Griff and me. It was heavy, taut with something unsaid. The house came into view, peeling paint, broken porch steps, and a barely lit porch bulb swaying in the wind. The kind of place you forget exists until the system reminds you someone still lives there or dies there. I slammed the brakes, and the ambulance skidded slightly before stopping. We were out and moving in seconds, me with the jump bag, Griff hauling the Lucas device. A woman with a smoker's cough and bare feet met us at the door. He just fell, she wheezed. I didn't know what to do. He was grabbing his chest and then he just went down. I pushed past her. The hallway reeked of cigarettes, mildew, and something darker, something sour and human. The carpet was stained. The walls were yellow with time. And there he was, sprawled on the floor of the living room, mouth open, eyes glassy, lips blue, no pulse. I froze. My father, the man who used to carry me on his shoulders and make bad jokes about dragons and peanut butter. The man who called me kiddo until the day he called me nothing at all. Griff's voice sliced through the fog. Riley, let's go. We're already behind. I dropped to my knees. Starting compressions, I said, but my hands hesitated for half a breath before finding the center of his chest. I began. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ribs cracked. I didn't let myself feel it. Griff applied the pads of the AED, and the device took over, whirring, thumping mechanically as it pumped his lifeless body. We intubated. Ivory, in an epi push. I couldn't look at his face. Not directly. Who is he to you? Griff asked. Somewhere in the flurry of tasks, as though sensing it. My father, I said. It felt foreign, as though I'd said it in someone else's voice. Griff didn't say anything, just nodded once. Then he was back to checking vitals and prepping for transport. We loaded him into the rig, rain still coming down in sheets, thunder rumbling somewhere in the distance, like the earth was restless, like it knew something wasn't right. Inside the ambulance, I straddled the bench seat, one hand on the Lucas device, the other clutching the monitor leads, calling out every change. No rhythm, no response, no doubt, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. Not when everything I'd wanted to say, to scream, to cry, to ask, was choking me. Why did you leave? Did you ever think about me? Did you miss me? Did you regret it? Hang in there, you son of a bitch, I muttered, voice shaking. You don't get to die before we talk. Griff said nothing. Maybe he knew better. Maybe he knew some resurrections were more about the living than the dead. We arrived at County General 10 minutes later. The trauma team was waiting. Code blue. Full arrest. No vitals. One of the nurses recognized me. Riley, is that? Yes, I said, already backing out as the team swarmed him. I stepped into the hallway, my gloves streaked with blood, my uniform damp and reeking of old smoke and adrenaline. My heart was hammering, my brain racing. Not because I might have just watched a stranger die, but because I might have just failed to save the one person I hated most and still wanted to love. And as the trauma doors swung closed behind him, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want him to die. Not yet. Not like this. The doors swung shut behind him, and for a beat, everything slowed. The hallway outside Trauma 3 was silent, except for the click of shoes against tile and the dull hum of fluorescent lights overhead. My gloves felt too tight, my lungs too small. I stared at the blood smudged on my hands, his blood, and tried not to think about the last time I'd seen it, drying around a scab on my 6-year-old knee while he fumbled for a band-aid and said, "Tough kid, just like your old man." Now he was the one bleeding. Now I was the one fumbling. Griff touched my shoulder. "You don't have to watch this." "Yes, I do." He nodded and stepped back. I pressed my back against the cool wall outside the trauma room, watching through the tiny window. The team moved like a machine. Efficient, synchronized, chest compressions. Bag mask. More epa. Lines in both arms. The Lucas thumped against his chest like a clock, counting down. I remembered how he used to sit with his coffee, watching the news in a tattered recliner, cigarette balanced between 2 fingers. I traced the tattoos on his forearms, while he read the headlines. The eagle, the anchor, the ghost of a name he once loved. My mother's, now scarred into oblivion. The monitor beeped erratically, no rhythm. Another round, I heard someone say. More epia, more shocks. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. My stomach knotted, my knees ached. Every breath I took felt like it was stealing one he couldn't. And then, we have a rhythm. My breath caught. The room changed instantly. A flurry of new orders. Someone called up to ICU. They stabilized him barely. Bagging continued. Blood pressure barely ticking up. Dr. Kelso stepped out, pulling his mask down. He's back for now. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lip. Kelso looked at me, head tilted. "Family?" I nodded. "Daughter." He glanced back through the window. "He's critical. We've intubated, but he's not responding neurologically. We'll get him up to the ICU. Try to cool him. Best shot he's got." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you." He hesitated. "Sometimes it helps to talk to them. Familiar voices. Touch. Even if they don't respond. Doesn't hurt to try." He walked off, leaving me with a choice I hadn't been ready to make. Inside the room, my father looked smaller. Machines dwarfed him. The man who used to tower over me now looked like he was already half gone. Tubes, gauze, monitors. I stepped inside. It smelled of antiseptic and blood, and something else. Hope clinging on like condensation on glass. I sat by the bed and stared. "Hey," I said, my voice foreign in my own ears. "It's Riley. Your daughter. Remember me?" No response. "You left when I was 12. Just walked out. No goodbye, no note. Just gone." The machines beeped. The ventilator hissed. "I hated you for it. You know that? Every school event, every birthday, every stupid father-daughter dance. You were the ghost in every empty seat. Still nothing. But here I am, sitting next to your bed, covered in your blood, begging you not to die. So, how's that for irony?" A tear slipped down my cheek. I brushed it away angrily. "I don't forgive you. Not yet. But maybe I don't want you dead either. Maybe I want answers. Maybe I want you to wake up so I can scream at you properly." I leaned forward and took his cold hand. "You owe me that much. You owe me something. Please, don't make this the end of your story, or mine." I sat with him until they came to wheel him up. I didn't move, didn't speak, and as they took him away, I realized the panic hadn't faded. It had just shifted. Because now came the weight. Now came the question no one could answer. Would he wake up? The ICU was cold, not physically, though the air was brisk and recycled, but spiritually, like the place itself had grown tired of miracles. The kind of tired that seeped into the walls and made the fluorescent lights flicker, not from electrical faults, but fatigue. The kind of tired that nurses masked with coffee and the same hopeful scripts they repeated day in and day out. My father lay unconscious in bed 3, his chest rising and falling under the rhythm of the ventilator. The cooling protocol had already started. Body temperature lowered artificially to give his brain a fighting chance. They told me this part was crucial. Told me he might wake up. Told me he might not. The might not stuck like a splinter in my mind. I had brought coffee. Not for him. For me. Or maybe for the version of me that still thought I could sip something warm and pretend this was all just another call. Another patient. Riff had gone home. Or maybe to another rig. I didn't ask. I just needed space. I stared at the vitals. BP holding, heart rate stable, oxygen levels decent, all meaningless numbers unless he woke up. The chair creaked under me as I shifted closer. The room buzzed with machines and hushed footsteps. And outside, someone coughed. A long, rattling sound like they were choking on ghosts. I spoke again. You used to whistle when you made breakfast. Off-key, loud. It drove Mom nuts. She'd throw a dish towel at you every damn time and you'd just laugh. I used to think that meant you were happy. Maybe you were. I touched his hand. It felt less cold today. That meant something, right? Do you remember the beach trip? The one where you carried me on your back into the waves and I got stung by a jellyfish. You told me real warriors never cried. But then you cried when you stepped on a crab. Silence. Why'd you leave? I whispered. Why not say goodbye? I expected nothing, but then, his eyelids twitched. I shot up, leaned in. Dead? The monitor didn't change. His eyes stayed closed. Maybe a spasm, maybe a false alarm. My breath stuck in my throat. Then again, a twitch, a flicker. I hit the call button. I think he's waking up. A nurse rushed in, checked pupils, checked responsiveness. Let's not jump the gun, she said, but her voice was hopeful. He's reacting. That's good. Could be the start. They ran more tests. Adjusted meds. I was pushed gently out into the hallway. I paced. I stared at the floor tiles until they blurred into a mosaic of guilt and maybe. An hour passed. Then, another. Dr. Kelso finally emerged, peeling off gloves. He's opening his eyes. He's slow, but he's following commands. That's a very good sign. I didn't trust myself to speak. He may not remember everything right away, Kelso said. Or anything. Brain needs time. But he's there. I nodded. They let me back in. His eyes were half open. Clouded. But alive. The machines were quieter now. Less frantic. Hey, I said, sitting beside him. You remember me? He blinked. His lips parted. A rasp of a sound too dry to be words. It's Riley. Your daughter. He closed his eyes. A tear slid down his cheek. For a moment, we were just two people trapped between the past and the possibility of redemption. You don't have to say anything, I said softly. Just don't die. Not yet. We're not done. The ventilator hissed. The heart monitor ticked steadily. I held his hand and waited. Again, because some things take longer to come back than a pulse. He woke up 3 days later. Not all at once. Not like the movies where the patient gasps and remembers everything. It was slower, eyes blinking open in short bursts, words slurring together like wet chalk on pavement, recognition taking shape behind cloudy pupils. But he knew my name. Riley, he rasped, and it sounded like someone else's voice filtered through gravel and memory. I choked on a sob I hadn't meant to release. Yeah, it's me. You're okay. He tried to sit up, winced, and gave up. Where am I? County General. You coded. Massive cardiac event. They cooled your body to save your brain. You almost didn't make it. He nodded, weakly. His fingers twitched like they were chasing ghosts. I saw your face, he murmured. In the ambulance. I thought it couldn't be. Thought I was dead. You almost were. A long silence stretched between us. Not tense, just heavy. Like a field that had been fallow too long, waiting for seeds of something real. His eyes found mine again. You're an EMT. I nodded. 3 years. He looked away. Makes sense. Your mother always said you had guts. Don't talk about her. I snapped. Too fast. Too raw. He flinched. Not from the pain, but from the wound in my voice. I'm sorry, he said. For a lot of things. Sorry doesn't fix 11 years. No. It doesn't. I stood, and walked to the window. The city looked different from up here, smaller, like someone had cracked open a snow globe and all the chaos had settled at the bottom. She told me you were gone for good, I said. Said you couldn't handle being a father, that you chose the bottle over the family. He didn't defend himself, just closed his eyes and whispered, "She wasn't wrong." I turned. "Then why now? Why'd you call for help?" "I didn't. Wasn't me. Neighbor found me." He opened his eyes again. "But I'm glad it was you. I didn't deserve that, but I'm glad." The rage I'd carried for more than a decade wasn't gone. It clung to the edges of me like wet clothes. But it was complicated now, blurred by the image of his frail body, the machines keeping him tethered to this life. "I hated you," I said. "Still do, some days." He nodded, slowly. "I hate me too." We sat in that silence, a mutual confession inked in quiet understanding. Later that night, the nurse checked in, adjusted meds, gave me a sympathetic look. She had no idea who he was to me. She just saw a woman sitting vigil. "You should go home," she said kindly. "I will," I lied. I stayed. He drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes he mumbled nonsense. Sometimes he said her name, my mother's. Sometimes he just stared at me like he was trying to memorize my face before it was too late. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said to him, in the dark. "Not yet, but I'm here." And maybe that was the start. Outside, the city pulsed with sirens and life. Someone else was calling 911. Someone else was breaking apart while I tried to stitch myself back together beside a man I once called Dad. They transferred him to step down 3 days after he woke up. By then he could eat soft food, whisper half a sentence, and sometimes hold a cup of water without spilling it. But he still hadn't asked about Mom. Not once. I stayed. Not every hour, but most. Slept in the chair, talked when he could listen, listened when he couldn't talk. It felt like watching an old film reel. Us paused in flickering frames, awkward with each other, trying to rediscover a language we'd forgotten. He pointed to the window once. "Still raining?" "Every day," I said, like it knows what's going on in here. He smiled. "Barely. Never liked the rain. Reminded me of the night I left." I looked at him, surprised. "You remember that?" "Every second," he said. "Your voice. You crying." I kept walking. A beat passed. "Why?" I asked. He coughed, the kind that rattled deep. His eyes shifted toward the ceiling. "Because I thought I'd ruin you. I thought leaving was the only thing I could give you that wasn't poisoned." I felt something crack inside me. Not anger, not even grief, just the echo of a childhood spent asking questions no one answered. "You could have called. A letter. Anything." He nodded. "I didn't have the strength or the right." The next day, I came in with old photos. I laid them out like evidence across the blanket. Him younger, me, tiny and gap-toothed. Birthday hats, sandcastles, backyard barbecue. "You remember these?" He nodded. "I do." There was one of him holding me, mid-spin, both of us laughing. "That was the last time you said I love you. You dropped me after, and Mom yelled at you because I scraped my elbow." He laughed, and it sounded like rust breaking off a forgotten hinge. "You were a tough kid," he said. "You were a broken man." Silence again. Comfortable, this time. Like we were finally exhaling some of the years we'd carried alone. He started rehab. Slow, painful. The nurses loved him, called him Gramps, and teased him about his grumbling. He let them. He even grumbled less. One day, as I was leaving, he grabbed my wrist. "You don't have to stay." "I know." "You have your own life, Riley. Your own ghosts. You don't owe me this." I looked at him, the way you look at a photograph you're not sure you want to keep. "I don't owe you," I said, "but maybe I owe her. The girl I was. The one who kept looking out the window every night thinking she'd hear your car." His eyes filled. He didn't blink. "I'm sorry I never came back. I'm sorry I waited so long to stop hoping." Another silence. One that didn't beg to be filled. He drifted off to sleep, and I sat by the window, watching the rain blur the city into watercolor memories. We were drifting towards something neither of us could name, but not away. Progress is a fragile illusion. We measure it in minutes, and medication, in the way someone you love holds their spoon without trembling, in how often the monitors stop beeping just long enough for you to remember there's still a world outside. And just when you start to believe in it, something slips. It was a Tuesday. The clouds finally cleared for the first time in over a week, and sunlight filtered into the room like a promise. He was halfway through a joke, something about a nurse who confused his call button with the TV remote, when it happened. He coughed, then choked, then everything unraveled. The monitor flatlined. I didn't scream. I didn't freeze. I was an EMT. I hit the code button and shouted down the hall before I even processed it. Nurses stormed in, crash cart, epinephrine, chest compressions. Again. I stood in the corner, hands clenched, watching as another team tried to save him. Again. But this wasn't the field. This wasn't a stranger. This was him. They got him back. Barely, but something had changed. He didn't wake up that night, or the night after. They told me it was a stroke. Massive. The kind that carves silence into your skull and leaves behind only echoes. The kind that unravels everything you spent days, years trying to build back. I sat beside his bed, holding his hand. "You son of a bitch," a whispered voice cracking. "You don't get to do this again. You don't get to walk away a second time." The machines hummed back at me. He didn't move. The doctors didn't say it, but I knew. This wasn't like before. There was no cooling protocol to reverse this. No Lucas device to pound life back into him. This was a quiet death, the kind that started slowly and ended in stillness. I slept beside his bed, head resting on the edge of the mattress. I dreamed of sandcastles and burnt grilled cheese sandwiches. I dreamed of the night he left, of the rain, of a 12-year-old girl, staring down an empty driveway. When I woke, the nurse was changing his IV. She looked at me gently. "We'll give you privacy if you want to talk." I shook my head. I said everything already, but later, when the lights were low and the corridor outside buzzed with a different life, I whispered anyway. "I wanted to hate you forever, but I couldn't. Even when I tried, because you were part of me, even when you weren't around." I looked at him, pale, still, no answers in his eyes now. Just a mirror to what I'd already decided. "I'll let you go," I said, the words like razors. "If you need to, I'll stop asking you to fight, if the fight's gone." I kissed his forehead, and for the first time in days, I walked out of the room. The next morning, the world felt indecisive. The air hung in that limbo between hope and mourning. The sun poured through the hospital window like a spotlight waiting for a scene to unfold, not knowing if it should shine for a beginning or a farewell. I walked into his room, expecting stillness. Instead, I found a whisper of motion, a finger, then a blink. I froze in the doorway. The nurse was already leaning in. He responded to verbal commands. Twice. "It's faint, but it's there." I stepped closer. My breath stuck halfway between disbelief and dread. "Dad?" His lips moved. Barely. And then sound. Relay. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for days. "I'm here." Tears welled up in his eyes. His mouth tried to shape words. No sentences yet, but his eyes held something real. Recognition, pain, relief, shame. All of it. He wasn't gone. Not yet. Not today. The doctors said the damage was substantial. Speech would come slowly. Motor skills, uncertain, but the prognosis shifted from hopeless to cautious. Later that afternoon, we sat in silence, his hand barely curling around mine. I told him everything again. My life, my mother's passing, the years he missed, the years he stole from me. "I'm not here to pretend nothing happened," I said. "But I am here." I stayed. "And now you've got to meet me halfway." His mouth moved. "Struggling. Try," he rasped. It broke me. Not because it was enough, but because it was honest. The road ahead would not be easy. Not for him. Not for me. There would be therapy, guilt, days where anger outweighed mercy, nights where silence would stretch too long and feel too much like the years we'd already lost. But we had this. A beginning. A single pulse in the void. In the days that followed, he spoke more. Asked about Mom. Cried when I told him. Told me he wished he'd come back. Told me he thought I'd forgotten him. No, I said. I remembered everything. He asked why I chose this life. EMT. Death. Trauma. Stranger. So maybe I'd know what to do if I ever found you again, I said. He cried harder than I'd ever seen him cry. A grown man, broken by the realization that someone he'd abandoned had spent her life preparing to save him, and I held him. Just held him. Weeks passed. He grew stronger. I returned to my shifts. Back to the calls, the codes, the chaos. But it was different now, because now when the radio crackled to life with another emergency, another life in free fall, I understood something deeper. Sometimes you don't get to save them, but sometimes you do. And sometimes, if you're lucky, saving them means saving something inside yourself too.